Dave Donahoo. I live in Baltimore, Maryland. My role is I'm the head of wealth management alternatives for Franklin Templeton, which is a publicly traded $1.6 trillion asset manager that's built over the last 5 years an alternative business primarily through inorganic growth, some organic growth. That's around $260 billion. So my role day to day is overseeing the firm's distribution efforts in the United States through a variety of different channels, and then the support functions that come with that. I've been here a little over 2 years. I spent 2 or so years prior to that at a private markets firm called Blackstone, based out of New York City, where I ran their private bank channel. And then for all those at Johns Hopkins, hopefully a familiar name, and I'm a Baltimorean. I live in the Green Spring Valley area with my wife and two kids. Spent 13, 14 years at T. Rowe Price in a variety of sales functions. So hopefully that's helpful, Channing. That's
It
that's kind of
is.
who I am and what I do. Yeah,
Perfect, perfect. And so that kind of leads into my first question. So it says, so I'd like to ask you, your career path spans over decades in wealth management and in alternatives, with leadership roles at T. Rowe Price, Blackstone, and now Franklin Templeton. So could you kind of give us like some insights into your journey in finance and what drew you to the alternative space?
sure. Don't date me that much. It's not quite 2 decades, but I'm close. Uh, so yeah, if you think about my journey in the financial space, I guess the punchline I would start with is anybody who's on or listening to this call is already ahead of where I was at your point. I was a business and econ major at a liberal arts college in Pennsylvania, Dickinson College, and I thought my whole life, including while in college, that I was going into a family business, which is unrelated to finance altogether. And so I say that to say, outside of the coursework that I had to do, I did no sort of finance internships. I was not part of an investment club like you all are, and I found myself graduating college, right before the global financial crisis hit, thinking I was entering a family business, and then realizing two things. One, I didn't necessarily see myself uh, intellectually curious and drawn to the family business, right, in the way I thought I might be. And two, like I just kind of wanted to carve my own path, for what I did with my career in the next 4 decades of my life. And so I say that to say you're all ahead of where I was when I
Hmm.
started. So my journey was one where I made a pivot right out of school, and I said, I've taken some classes in finance. Finance is interesting to me, and I want to go pursue something in that. So I ended up taking a job at T. Rowe Price, like most folks who take a job there out of undergrad in an entry level role in an inbound phone center, actually speaking to clients who would call us directly with questions about their investments with us. And the big takeaway there is like whatever role you're in,
Hmm.
I promise you will look back on it if you took that role seriously and if you really immerse yourself in that role, and you will find value in what you were doing in a way you did not anticipate.
Hmm.
Right. So be intellectually curious. Not everyone is going to come out of undergrad and go be a portfolio manager or an investment banker or
Hmm.
whatever the big buzzwords that you hear about are that people pursue. But for me, this was a really incredible chance to learn the industry. The second thing I would say is your life is a lot about luck. And I'm
Hmm.
a big believer that luck is where hard work meets opportunity, right? So you have to do the work to realize an opportunity when it presents itself to you. And the presentation of the opportunity is the luck, but the hard work is what allows you to monetize and capture the luck and build a career off of it. So for me, there's been moments of luck in my career, and I'll walk through this. But the first clear one was I ended up in a role in an inbound phone group right before the global financial crisis hit. Two things came out of that. One, I ended up talking to investors as a 21-year-old,
Hmm.
3 weeks into my career, who were calling thinking the world had ended. And you got to see the emotional
Hmm.
side of investing, which you do not read about in your textbooks, right?
Hmm.
So you got to see people who were concerned about losing their house, losing their job, losing their mortgage, having their accounts go to zero, and empathy and the ability to put yourself in somebody else's shoes. I always think about that moment as a really important one. So to play out the rest of your question on career path, I started in this inbound phone group. I was also equally lucky in a really perverse way
Mm,
that 6 months after that, right, like most financial services firms, the firm ended up unfortunately downsizing a portion of their staff. And I was lucky that as a young junior cheap individual, I was
mm,
not downsized, but then the firm hit a period of hyper growth for a decade, and if you're there for that hyper growth, you get to experience new things if you're working hard and you're raising your hand for them. So I was in this inbound phone group. I ended up on kind of a higher end servicing line, talking to clients, and then I moved in 2010 into a role that's more analogous to the role I have today, where you're proactively reaching out to financial advisors who manage money on behalf of clients and or the home offices of these big wealth management organizations like a Merrill Lynch or a JP Morgan or a Raymond James, and working for an asset manager, you're talking to them about your products and you're trying to convince them that depending on what they want to accomplish, your products are the right products to use to accomplish that goal. So I did a variety of different things during T Rowe, my time at T Rowe during that period of growth. An amazing firm, one I owe a huge debt of gratitude to. And then as I got later into my career there, I realized for a lot of secular reasons,
mm,
right, the growth might not be what it had been for the last decade for that type of business, namely traditional active public market investing. And the other part of what I tried to share earlier and the wisdom I'll try and leave with this group is right intellectual curiosity and being a student of whatever you do. So for me, it became obvious that private markets or alternatives were growing meaningfully, not
mm,
just as an asset class that people allocated to, but the way they were structured from a product perspective and the technology that made them easier to use and more accessible for non-institutions, things that were driven by humans instead of pension plans. And at that time, I wanted to pivot to that space. I was trying to figure out how. I went back to getting my MBA. I went to Wharton and I got my MBA, and I was taking classes in private equity and alternative asset classes. And then I was really fortunate during that period to get a call from Blackstone, the largest manager of private market assets globally. They were trying to build a sales team in the channel that I had spent 14 years at T Rowe building a sales team.
mm,
They saw enough in me to think I could become an expert in the private markets, and they brought me into that firm. Second piece of luck, I joined that firm right before that firm sort of had parabolic growth in its business.
mm,
And so people wanted to replicate what that firm was doing. And I was really fortunate that my now boss called me and asked me to join Franklin Tempelton to try and replicate what we were doing at Blackstone. So that was a really long, meandering answer, Channing. But if I try and bring it home, that's my career path. And I would say the key takeaways are look, luck is important, which means you have to be patient, but you have to do the work. Be a student of whatever industry you end up in. And one thing that's always served me well is look at my peers, but importantly, look one or two roles up as I get to know a firm and I'm intellectually curious and figure out what people are doing one or two roles up that appeals to me and try
mm,
and emulate what they're doing and differentiate yourself from your peer group through a thirst for knowledge and continual learning.
mm,
If you do your job right, the exams you take when you leave Hopkins will not be the last exams you take.
mm. Okay. Yeah, no, that was a very detailed question, and it actually answered like my first three questions in total, because they all like were segues, and there was definitely a lot of valuable information that you just imparted to our student members. So thank you for that. Uh, okay, and so to change topics just slightly, what lessons have you learned? I mean, you said that you've always been inquisitive, and with being inquisitive, you always try new things, and you might not always be successful at certain things, and you might be more successful at other things. So, a topic I want to talk about is having worked with high net worth clients and intermediaries, what would you say is the most valuable lesson you learned about building and maintaining client relationships in wealth management?
It's a excellent question. And I'm learning lessons about it literally as we're speaking
Hmm.
for a situation I'm working through with one of our most important clients. Um, how do you maintain client relationships? You maintain client relationships through trust. How do you
Hmm.
maintain trust? You maintain trust by when things go right, and most importantly, when things don't go quite as right, being there,
Hmm.
being open, being honest, being transparent, talking about what worked, what didn't work, why the things that didn't work, and what you're doing to make sure they work better in the future. And that's a tough thing to do. Early on in my career, when you fail, quote unquote, or when something isn't a success, you have a tendency to let that bog you down and you want to shrink up and you want to hide from it. But the reality is something is only a failure. Um, if you define it as one, and if you don't take it as an opportunity to learn and grow and get better and get things more right going forward. So I would say the biggest thing for me, and I was literally 5 minutes on, I was almost late to this call because I was on the phone talking through something that relates to your question, talking to the head of a family office, with a client who's well over $1 billion, who is looking to entrust us with money
Hmm.
and not for investment reasons, but for some operational reasons. There's a challenge or two behind that. And I might have handled the conversation differently 10 years ago, but I'll tell you how I handled it today, which is I'll make up the name. Let's call it Todd, right? I said, Todd, look, it's really complicated. It's really fluid, but let me give you the punchline up front. These are the two things that didn't go as well on my end as I would have liked. And here's
Hmm.
why I think those things didn't go as well. And here's what we're doing about it. But if
Hmm.
we broaden out, right, here's what you asked us to accomplish. Here's what we have accomplished. Here's what we're confident we will accomplish going forward. And at the end of the day, for those two things that aren't working as cleanly as we would like right now, and this is probably the most important two words you will ever have in your career if you pursue a career in sales or relationship management, I'm sorry,
Hmm.
right? I'm sorry, but here's what we're doing to make it right. And I think
Hmm.
if you handle those things the right way, um, it will surprise a lot of people, but your relationship actually gets stronger as a result of how you respond to a crisis, not weaker. Now, it's very tough to apologize for a lack of integrity.
Hmm.
It's a lot easier to apologize for a lack of competency, right?
Hmm.
So, point number one to relationship management and trust is act with integrity at all times. Point number two is there will be periods where the competency isn't quite exactly where the client expected it to be, and own that.
Hmm.
And if you do that, you will have a very successful career.
Okay. Thank you for that answer. So being able to say sorry, that's it's funny. That's actually the first time I've even heard those words said by anyone in finance that I've talked to.
You've
So
talked to the wrong people then. You've talked to the wrong people then. If you were talking
yeah.
about a career in relationship management with individuals, managing people's money or helping facilitate the process of managing people's money, you
Hmm.
better learn the words, I'm sorry.
Hmm. It makes perfect sense when you explain it.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, and so it's like early in your career, what challenges did you face like at T. Rowe Price, as an early associate, for some of our members who will be entering our first
Yeah.
entry level positions, like what were some challenges you faced and how did you overcome them?
Yeah. So look, I think one of the big ones, and just by nature of the fact, Channing, that folks like yourself are doing this interview. Yeah, individuals like me are listening to this interview. People are going to be listening to this recording. Um, what does it mean? It means you have ambitions for your career, and that's a very good thing, right? It means you were focused, you were dedicated, you were trying to build something. Early in your career, there will be a period where if you're doing things right, you feel like you've developed the skill set and competency you need to do more and do more quicker than an organization is ready for you at this tenor in your career to do.
Hmm.
And the biggest lesson I've had to learn at multiple points in my career is patience, right? Patience to understand I may think I'm ready for something, but there's not an opportunity to do that yet. So, how do I stay focused on what I'm doing and continue to broaden and deepen my experience. And there's there's an immeasurable amount of value that's come to my career by being in roles, whether I thought I should be in them as long as I was in them or not, but by taking those roles seriously,
Hmm.
by networking across my organization, by being a student of the industry, by even though I took my role really seriously, trying to understand other aspects of the firm. And I'm a big believer in the what would the CEO do? Right. So I think a lot regardless of what my role is. And I would encourage all of you to think about this way because it broadens your scope. Your first year working for a financial services company in an analyst role. Think to yourself occasionally, what would the CEO do? Right? Because that's
Hmm.
going to force you to think beyond the box of your role and about the totality of the firm and the intricacies of the firm. And it doesn't mean you're going to make that decision. It means you are building a skill set that preps you for that. And I'll give you one more kind of weird example on this. If you do those things, you will be more ready for the next role than you ever
Hmm.
imagined. And when you get to that next role, you will excel in it quicker. And then you will hit a point in your flywheel where you're actually looking at the world the other way and say, I'm advancing quicker than I thought I would. But at the start, it is really about broadening out in depth. And so the analogy for that is like last night I watched some of the Monday night football game before I fell asleep, and it was the Lions and the Packers. And the Packers lost, and he didn't play great, but he's a Pro Bowler. Jordan Love. And for those that are football fans, like Jordan Love was a first round draft pick. Typically, first round draft picks start at quarterback the first
Hmm.
year they're drafted. I don't know the exact number, Channing, maybe you do, but I think he watched Aaron Rodgers play quarterback for 4 years.
Hmm.
First round draft pick who didn't play football for 4 years. That probably was not easy for him. He might end up being a Hall of Famer because of it.
Hmm. So patience.
Patience.
Patience, being able, and in that time when you are being patient, still preparing yourself for those next roles. And you also gave some good frameworks of thought that we can implement during that time to do that. Okay. Okay. And so just for our student members, a little bit more to go into that, that preparation. When you are prepared, what's some advice you would give students to stand out in order to build a successful career? How are we differentiating? How do you think it's best that we differentiate ourselves?
Yeah. This is probably a really important point post COVID.
Hmm.
Regardless of where your first role is and what their work from home or work from the office policy is, show up to the office.
Hmm.
Show up to the office. It is unfair to young individuals early in their career the impact work from home has had on them. And I realize I'm saying this to you from my home office. I travel 150 to 200 days a year for work. I'm in our offices nonstop. Today I'm at home. But think about the skill set that I was afforded the first 2 years of my career, sitting in an office building next to hundreds of other people that were doing the same thing I was doing and doing one or two levels up what I was doing. It wasn't just the osmosis of being around them that I learned. It was the networking that I received by asking the person who might have been, a superior in the organization who I met in the hallway, hey, can I grab coffee in 30 minutes of your time today?
Hmm.
Immerse yourself in being in the office. If they tell you got to be there 3 days a week, be there 4. If they tell you got to be there 4 days a week, be there 5. They tell you got to be there one day a week, be there 2 or 3, right? Like be there more, especially early days to build your network, to learn through osmosis. That's so tough to do the way we're talking right now behind a screen. And by the way, you went back to relationship management, going back to one of your other questions, relationship management. You think it's more impactful if I apologize to you on the Zoom screen or if I take a train to come see you in
Hmm.
New York and I sit across from you and I say, I'm sorry. Being in person with human beings matters if you were going to pursue, especially a career in relationship management. I can't stress that enough.
Great. Great. Thank you for that. That's very valuable information. And so let's see here. And so let's pivot a little bit more away from uh, what our current students are doing. Hopefully we are able to take your advice, and from that advice, we're able to build successful finance careers, and we go up the ladder. And now we are the head of wealth management at Franklin Templeton, obviously, after you leave.
You
So
can have my
as
job today if you want.
so as the head of wealth management and alternatives, what does your day-to-day look like, and what are the key responsibilities in your role?
Yeah, look, no day is the same, which is one of the things I love about this job. If you divide up what I'm doing, it probably fits into five or six big buckets, right? I'm traveling around the country with members of my organization who are our sales professionals that manage our day-to-day relationships. And I'm traveling with them to go speak to their clients alongside them to coach and monitor those employees and make sure they're still growing and developing as key members of our team. I'm working with a small subset of our largest clients myself directly because I think being a player coach is always very important. You never want to isolate yourself from the business.
Mhm.
Um, I'm working with other important key centers of excellence at our firm that we rely on to deliver the collective value we do together to clients. So I'm working with our marketing department, our operations department, our product department. I'm thinking about the future, right? If you're doing your job really well, you're often living 1 to 3 years in advance
Hmm.
in this type of role, right? As people are executing on the day to day and helping build what comes next. And then when you're at a large organization, you're also managing on behalf of your team's status, perception, role in the organization, the resourcing of that team, et cetera. Yeah, so to some extent, and I hate this word, right? But I'm managing up. I'm meeting with senior leadership on behalf of the team to let them know what we're doing, what we're not doing, what we need to win. But as you become a leader, the most important role you can do is hire the right people
Hmm.
and train the right people. And if you hire the right people and you train the right people, and I sign off on every hire we make as a team, that's very important to me. It does not matter the role. I will meet them before they join this firm because our team has four key values and everyone knows what they are. And I want to make sure that person can live those four and be a good cultural fit. But if you hire the right people and you build the right team, at some point your job is just really easy and it's really
Hmm.
simple. You are doing three things. You are a roadblock clearer, a resource gatherer, and a cheerleader. A roadblock clearer, let me get off your plate the
Hmm.
things you need off your plate to go accomplish your job. A resource gatherer, let me get you the tools you need, now the stuff that shouldn't be on your plate is off your plate, to maximize your success in your job. A cheerleader, if you were doing that, my only job is to get you recognized, rewarded, and help you continue to develop your career and your career path. And if you can lead that way, which I think of as servant leadership, right,
Hmm.
the team is going to do the rest for the organization. So your job is to set the mission, the vision, the values, put the right people in place, and help facilitate them doing it. Easier said than done, but that's how I think about a role like this.
Hmm. Servant leadership. That's a very specific word. I've heard that before used in a lot of different contexts. This is also the first time I've heard this word used in the finance industry, in the context of the finance industry. And I would definitely agree that it's very important, for building a team, like even uh, with the Alternative Investment Society, with some of the other leaders we've talked to, they're saying if you're micromanaging, you're doing something wrong as a leader, like if you're micromanaging, you're not something along the lines aren't isn't being conveyed in the way that it needs to be. So being someone that's clearing roadblocks instead of standing in front of your people as a roadblock, I definitely see how that could be very valuable. And so let's see here. Okay. And so, with Franklin Templeton today, with the wealth management industry growing as it is, and with the alternative investments industry growing as it is, considering you're the head of alternative investments, what new technologies or just new areas or alternative investments are you the most excited about, whether it's AI or how to implement that into your strategy or something. How are you excited about the alternative investment industry as you live, as you stated, 3 years ahead in the future?
Yeah. Well, again, a really great question, Channing, and I can tell just from this interview, right, that like that you're doing something so critical for a career in any role, but certainly finance. Like you're listening to what I'm saying, you're digesting it, you're adapting it into your own words, and you're feeding off that and asking me questions that
Hmm.
follow off. And so, like, kudos. Great questions. I think about, a lot of things is really exciting in this industry, but let's first frame why it's so exciting. If you think about the investment landscape, these are some stats that might astonish people. We have about half the publicly traded companies that we had 20 years ago.
Hmm.
Companies can stay private longer because of financing available to them, and because if you don't want to go public in a regulatory environment where a public company has more regulation and therefore costs associated with operating themselves as a public company, and you can finance yourself independently and stay private longer, you're probably going to do it. So we've half the publicly traded companies that we did 20 years ago. 90%, give or take, of companies in the United States with over $100 million in earnings are private.
Hmm.
In bonds, public market bonds, private bonds, which we call private credit. Private credit was something like 5% of all lending in the US at the time of the global financial crisis in 2008. It's between, I don't know, 25 and 30% today and growing.
Hmm.
Real estate, about 90% of real estate in the US is privately held. So simply put, if you're not investing in alternatives, namely the private markets, private equity, private real estate, private infrastructure, private credit, you're missing out on the full
Hmm.
investable universe. So that's part one, right? It's a big pool of investable capital. Part two is historically the only people that invested in private markets in a scalable way were institutions. Big pensions, big university endowments like Johns Hopkins University Endowment, big sovereign wealth funds, the sovereign wealth fund of Malaysia or Saudi Arabia, etc., and foundations. But you've had two things. You've had a technology revolution, this gets to your point of AI, and you've had a product revolution that over the last 5, 6 years in particular have made it easier for individuals to access alternatives in private markets. And they've made it easier in a few ways. One, the minimums to invest have come down because of technology.
Hmm.
The minimums to invest have also come down because of product innovation from asset managers like us. When I say minimums, I mean the accreditation. Like historically, you have to meet a very high net worth standard to even invest in these products, and that's come down. And then the actual minimum dollar amount you have to invest has come down too, and therefore, more people can have access to it. Technology is making it easier to subscribe or invest into these products, which often requires a lot of manual paperwork, and now can be digitized and streamlined in a much bigger way. And they're more investor friendly from a tax perspective as far as the type of tax forms you receive. So we're entering really this golden era of wealth management investment into private markets or alternatives, driven by technology like AI,
Hmm.
product innovation, regulatory innovation and changes and updates. At the same time, that more of the companies, properties, and lending in the US is leaving the public markets and going private. So it's like a sun moves, stars align
Hmm.
moment that's making it a lot easier. And that's what's really exciting to me. You have to be smart about how you do it. You have to provide education to clients, and we do a lot on that front. But I think we're in the first, maybe second inning of what is a decade-long trend in alternative adoption.
Hmm. Interesting. So you see a lot of growth potential here. And not only that, you see a lot of growth not only on the institutional side, but with retail investors getting into private assets. That's really
Uh,
interesting.
one caveat to that, I see a lot of growth with retail investors getting into private assets. You're spot on your comment on institutions, that they use a lot of them today. Institutions have about 30-ish, give or take, depending on the study you look at, of their assets invested in private assets.
Hmm.
Some far more, some far less. Like the Yale endowment is famous for having 75+% of their portfolio on private assets. So I think the institutions are where they're going to be. They
Okay.
already have their healthy allocations for sure, very healthy allocations. But if you say institutions are about 30% today, and individual investors are at about 3% today, right? Think about the growth rate on the individual investors as things get easier for them. That's where the real hyper growth is going to be, in a very exciting way.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Interesting. Interesting. Retail investors and private assets. That's a new sentence. But I did.
I've bet my career on that sentence. That is my job. Yeah.
I believe you. It sounds very exciting. And so, yeah, and also, with private assets, they're, less susceptible to market volatility and things of that nature. It might be havens in like, economic downturn. So I definitely agree that, retail investors would love to get in on those type of investments. And so now that we've talked some more about what your role is at, Franklin Templeton and what that entails, I want to go back and ask one more question that will be a little bit more applicable to our students that will be watching this. And you kind of already answered it, um, but what habits or practices have contributed most to your personal and professional growth? I know that one thing you said was staying inquisitive, thinking ahead, putting yourself in the position, the mind frame of your managers and things of that nature. Um, are those most of the ways or most of the habits or practices, or is there anything else that you would like to add to that have contributed to your growth?
Yeah. I think you've summed up a lot of them. I've been incredibly fortunate in my career, Channing, that I've had great mentors and leaders and colleagues and peers that have helped me grow. If I try and sum it up, regardless of what profession you get into, people need to stay intellectually curious, right? Continual learning will be a huge part of your life, not just your college experience, but your life. If you approach life the way I would encourage people to approach it, right? So intellectually curious and continual learning. Um, it's not very in vogue to say this, but I firmly believe it. So I will say it. We talk about work-life balance a lot as a society. And I think work-life balance is a very important thing if you think about it the way I do, which is maybe not the way society always thinks about it today. And
Hmm.
that's there's trade-offs to everything. And I have an amazing wife and two terrific children, and I prioritize the time I'm with them and I'm present when I can be present. But to be really clear, in your career, you can be, not good, right? If you're not good, right, that probably doesn't work out long, right? You can be like a little below average. You can be average. You can be above average. You can be good. You can be great. But you can be different. And at some point on that line, and I don't know where it is, you can probably be good working 40 hours a week, depending on the job, right? It varies by job, and certain jobs don't demand that of you relative to others. But like if someone really wants to know an honest answer about how you have a really successful career in finance or any other industry, you know, some aspect of that might require not having work-life balance in your life for a period of time in the
Hmm.
traditional sense. And that's okay to say out loud. And it's also
Hmm.
very okay to say, but I don't want to pursue that path, and this is what I'm willing to put into my work. People should just know that's what they're going to get out of it, right? Or pick a profession in which you can work X amount of time and really excel. But I don't know that we always are just super honest about that. If you want to build something, no matter what field it's in, and you think your life is going to be in balance at all times, we've probably misled you. So I would
Hmm.
say continual learning, student in whatever industry you're in, understand you're going to get out of it what you put in. Humility really, really matters. Never underestimate the power of your network, right? Get to know others, care about them, be intellectually curious. You never know when you'll be able to help them or they'll be able to help you. And then you have to have whatever you do, a lot of grit and a lot of determination and a lot of resiliency. Because the reality is, you will all, and I hate using this word because I don't believe in it, right? And I'll explain what I mean by I don't believe in it, but you all fail. I fail all the time. But again, I don't think it's failure if you think about it as a journey, right? Not a destination, right? Failing to me really just means something didn't go as well as you wanted it to go, and you're going to adapt and learn from that experience so it goes better next time. And if you have that mindset, that's a growth mindset. No matter what you do in your life, you will end up being successful.
Thank you. Thank you for that information. I'm sure, like me, a lot of our student members will find value in that and not being afraid to put themselves out there because everything is, an opportunity to learn, regardless of the outcome. So not shying away from the word that you don't like, failure, but using it as an opportunity to learn and grow for sure. And so you talked a little bit about work-life balance, and as we all know, well, as I've heard, and maybe um, junior associates or entry-level positions in a lot of finance industries, you usually end up working long hours, maybe getting overworked or things of that nature. So, how do you feel that how do you feel your work-life balance is supported at Franklin Templeton and beyond Franklin Templeton, uh, for students who will be entering the industry? Um, how much should we care about our work-life balance as we're coming in, because you did kind of say you can either have a good work-life balance or you can, try to climb the corporate ladder, but it's kind of hard to do both. So, how should we be weighing
Yeah.
that as we, enter our careers?
Yeah, I think it's a individual choice, um, based on what you want, what you want out of work and what you want out of broadly speaking, which is far more important than work, what you want out of life. And people should never lose sight of that.
Mm,
And to be really clear, and I agree with your point on the perception of like junior associates and this industry, I think that's fairly unique to investment banking. And I've never been an investment banker, but you read those
mm,
stories about junior investment bankers working 100 plus hours a week, right? And that's not what I'm describing when I talk
mm,
about your life might be out of work, life balance for a little bit, right? Like that is an extreme. We at Franklin Templeton don't have a culture that involves that, right?
mm,
But at any firm in any industry you go into, right? Again, you're going to get out of it what you put into it. So I'll just tell you how I live that, right? I mean, I work probably 70 to 80 hours a week right now as a 38-year-old with two young children. Ironically, I'm probably working longer hours than I have at any point in my career. It's a byproduct of the role I'm in today and the life cycle of the business that I'm incredibly fortunate enough to lead. Do I want to work 70 to 80 hours for the rest of my life? No, I don't think I can do that, right? This I talk about like work-life balance as a moving scale. But I know that's where I am right now. I understand why I am there. It's actually because I believe to my core in what we're doing, and I need to do this at this point to empower my team. But the other thing my team knows about me, and I expect this of them because I deliver it for myself, is my daughter has a concert recital, right? I'm at
mm,
that concert recital,
mm,
right? She's got soccer on Tuesday night. If I'm in Maryland where I live, I'm at that soccer event on Tuesday night. Um, my spouse and I have time, whether it's a date night or whatever, like that's super important to be honored. Um, I take my vacation. I may have to work a little bit on my vacation, but I take my vacation. If I'm sick, I give myself time to recover. Um, if there's something going on in my family life that needs to be prioritized over work, I drop what I'm doing and I do that. And my team knows that I expect the same out of them, right? Because at the end of the day, what we do here, as important as I think what I do is, it doesn't matter relative
mm.
to the relationship you have with your children, with your spouse, with your siblings. Um, so I think about work-life balance and like be really efficient, understand you're going to get out of it what you put into it. And that might mean longer hours at times, period.
Mm,
but never lose sight of what's really important and have your foundations and kind of your rules so that when you need to be present for something outside of work, you're present and truly present, not distracted, not checking your phone, engaged and present. Quality is way more important than quantity in accomplishing a work-life balance, is what I would say.
quality over quantity. So whenever we are there, we're
Be
putting
there.
110% effort
Be
in.
there.
Hmm,
Yep.
great, great. And so for our last topic, this is actually one of the questions that I personally made out of the list of questions that the rest of the executive board on the Alternative Investment Society came up with. And it's, whether it's the new election, the new incoming administration, inflation, or, all the potential economic uncertainty. How do you, in wealth management, when maintaining a relationship with your clients, how do you not comfort them, but how do you explain these situations to them to keep them comfortable keeping their money with you? Are there certain strategies or certain alternatives that you say, hey, you can come here, or we can allocate to this or this, but how do you maintain those relationships in times of uncertainty?
Yeah, well, the good news is I don't think I've ever seen a time of certainty in my 18, 19-year career. So
Mm,
this answer is going to apply across your entire career if you're in a career in finance and wealth management. You always have the prospects of changes from a regulatory perspective. Administrations come and go, regulation around that comes and goes, interest rate policy changes and doesn't change, macroeconomic events occur and don't occur. The change is the constant. I think you have to be incredibly consultative. And right, we're
mm,
really fortunate as a firm that we have a wide breadth of solutions we
mm,
can provide individuals that affords us the chance to be consultative. So I don't have to show up to a conversation with you, Channing, regardless of where we are in the macroeconomic cycle. Look at you and try and fit a round peg into a square hole by saying,
mm,
all I do is private real estate and you must buy private real estate because that's not who we are. That's not what we do.
mm,
You'll never be a long-term good salesperson if you do that. What you have to do is care about people. You have to be consultative. You have to ask a lot of questions. Listen more than you talk. That's a lesson I could probably learn. I'm talking a lot on this call. And and if you're doing that, then you're figuring out what the challenges somebody has, what they prefer, what they don't prefer, both from asset class and vehicle type, and you're whittling down the funnel in a really consultative way to say, okay, based on this conversation, right, and what you're telling me, this might be the appropriate solution to help you solve that problem. And if you take a really long-term lens to it as well, you asked me a question earlier about, yeah, how do you build kind of trust, right, and maintain long-term relationships? Sometimes that means saying, I'm not the person that can help you,
mm,
right? And I've done that more than I can count in my career. We don't have a solution for every problem. But if I'm a student in this industry and I consult with and I care about my clients and I understand what they're asking for, and I say something like, you know, I hear what you're describing. If here's like this is your challenge, I'm thinking this might be your solution based on what you're saying, and I don't have it.
mm.
But Channing does. Do you know Channing? I know Channing. He might have that solution. And and you talk about building trust, that's an incredibly powerful thing to do, right? Because now it's not a transactional relationship, it's a friendship and
Mm,
a consultative relationship. And that's an important part of a friendship and a consultative relationship. Occasionally saying, I don't have the solution to
mm.
your problem, but I know someone who might.
Okay. Right. Being consultative, being honest. That's one of the main points I've gotten from that, being able to be honest and say, I don't have the solution, or I'm sorry, this didn't go this way, or, things of that nature. Being honest, it's definitely an overarching theme that I have gathered from this conversation. Well, I want to thank you for joining us today, Mr. Donahoo. It's 3:15, and that is the time that we've allocated, or you allocated for us in your day. So I do appreciate having the opportunity to speak with you, and for all the alternative investment society student members who will be watching this later. We'd also like to thank you as well. And so you have a great rest of your day. And once again, thank you for joining us.
Shannon, thank you for having me. Great job hosting this. I appreciate the questions and good luck to you and everybody and what comes next. Never forget it's a journey and make sure you have some fun along the way. But thank you for having me.